All right, this video is for the second half of Module 42, having to do with inflation and exchange rates. Now, so far, we've been talking about exchange rates, and what we've been looking at with exchange rates are pretty much nominal exchange rates. However, we do need to talk about real exchange rates. So we've talked about real and nominal a few times in class. We've talked about real and nominal interest rates, real and nominal GDP. We have looked at, and now we're going to look at real and nominal exchange rates. So if you think about it, what's the difference between nominal and real? Anytime you talk about nominal and real. Nominal includes inflation, while real excludes inflation. So when we're talking about exchange rates, it's the same thing. Is that real exchange rates are adjusted for inflation. In other words, they're taking inflation out of the equation. We're looking at, okay, without inflation in there, what would it actually be? And if you remember when we talked about this with GDP, we used a base year, right? Because we're taking out of the equation those things that, are the reason GDP might have gone up was because inflation went up. So we want to know what was account of non-inflation. So in the example of exchange rates, we're looking at real exchange rates. So we're looking at what the exchange rate would be without inflation, whereas nominal exchange rates would be including inflation. So, in order to figure out real exchange rates, I try to simplify this down as much as possible. Real exchange rates, and this would be a real exchange rate for the United States, would be the foreign currency per dollar, in other words, the nominal exchange rate, times the price index of the U.S. divided by the price index for a foreign country. Oh boy, this is going back into price index. Do we remember those? We'll see. So, I have an example for you. So, it's best if we have an example. The example is, it says, this is actually an example from your textbook, but the example says, a basket of goods in the United States costs $100, but costs 80 pesos in Mexico, and the exchange rate is 10 pesos per US dollar. In 5 years, the basket of goods costs $120, and in Mexico costs 1,200 pesos, and the exchange rate is still 10 pesos per US dollar. So what I'm asking is that what's the real exchange rate now and in 5 years? Assume that now is the base year. Okay, so first of all, in order to do this for now, okay, so for now, we are going to take the foreign currency per dollar. So what's our foreign currency per dollar? So our currency is pesos that we're talking about. So how many pesos per US dollar? You should say 10, right? Because it says 10 pesos per US dollar. So that's going to be our foreign currency per dollar times the price index of the US divided by the price index of the foreign country. And I also said, assume that now is the base year. Well, remember that in order to get our price index, we have to remember our price index equation. So do you remember that? Go back and flip through back to your equation section of your notebook if you don't, and look it up, and I'll wait. So hopefully you found some sort of equation similar to this one. So the price index for a given year is the cost of the market basket in that given year divided by the cost of the market basket in a base year times 100. So if we're saying that we're looking at for the United States, and we're saying that the United States is, we're looking at the cost of the market basket now is $100, and the base year is $100. Okay, so 100 divided by 100, because now is the base year, times 100 will give you 100, right? What about in Mexico? Now, in Mexico, it costs 800 pesos. So the cost of the market basket in the given year is 800. Now is the base year, so we're dividing by 800 times 100. So 800 divided by 800 is 1, times 100 is 100. So the price index of the US is 100, and the price index for Mexico is 100. So in order to figure out what the real exchange rate now is, it's going to take 10, which is our nominal exchange rate, 10 pesos per US dollar, times the price index for the US, which is 100, divided by the price index for Mexico, which is 100. So that is equal to 10 pesos per US dollar. So how about in 5 years? Okay, so in 5 years, this is a little trickier. We have to first determine the price index. So remember, because now is our base year. Okay, we're going to have to use that as our base. So, for example, looking at the United States, in 5 years, the cost of this market basket is $120. So it's going to be 120 divided by the cost of that market basket now is 100. So 120 divided by 100 times 100 will give you 120. So 100, I just flipped this by the way, 100 times 120, which is the price of that market basket now, or in 5 years, divided by the price of the market basket now, which is 100, will give you 120. So what about in Mexico? In Mexico, in 5 years, the cost of that market basket is 1,200 pesos, but it's now at 800 pesos. So you're going to do 1,200 divided by 800 times 100. So 100 times 1,200 divided by 800, okay, times 100 will give us 150. Now that we have our price indexes, now we can actually plug it into this real exchange rate equation. So now the foreign currency per dollar, well, in 5 years, the foreign currency per dollar is still 10 pesos per US dollar. So this is still going to maintain 10, okay? Then we're going to multiply that by the price index of the US, which is 120, divided by the price index of the foreign country, which is Mexico, divided by 150. So our real exchange rate is 10 times 120 over 150, which equals 8 pesos per US dollar. Hopefully that made sense. There is another example of this in your homework assignment, so hopefully this explanation will help you be able to do your homework assignment. I think it's number 4 for Module 42. All right. So that said, what about purchasing power parity? This is the idea that this is kind of the exchange rate at which a basket of goods and services will cost the same in 2 countries. So we're looking at this basket of goods and services is going to cost this much in this country and this much in the other country. So what would the exchange rate have to be able to make it be the same? So I am going back to that same example that I had on the last slide. So you'll notice it's still talking about the United States and Mexico, but now we're determining the purchasing power parity now and in 5 years. So in this case, we're looking at the prices, and we're comparing the prices now and in 5 years. So we're not actually using that 10 pesos per US dollar this time. So in this case, what we're looking at is now we're looking at 800 pesos or $100 is going to buy the same market basket. So 800 divided by 100 will tell us that 8 pesos per US dollar should be the exchange rate so that we can get the same items either in the United States or in Mexico. That's what the exchange rate should be. Whereas in 5 years, what are you going to do? So stop and think about it. Pause the video if you need to. So if you figured out it should be 1,200 divided by 120, you would be correct. So that would mean 10 pesos per US dollar. That will go and give us the purchase power parity in 5 years. The interesting thing is that this is basically done in and they look at a lot of different market baskets, but the magazine The Economist actually does this once a year for one product, and it's actually very accurate, amazingly so. They do it for McDonald's Big Macs. So they look at, for example, the dollar value of a Big Mac in the United States and the dollar value of a Big Mac, say, for example, in London or in a European country using the euro. Okay, so this would actually look at the purchasing power parity is looking at, okay, in $3.57 compared to $2.29. So this tells us for $1.56 it approximately equals €1. Okay, the actual exchange rate is about $2 to €1. This is actually very predictive of where the exchange rate should be going. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, these 2 slides are really good in answering the last question for your homework assignment. So let me know if you have any questions.